the office of the president is the second most corrupt public institution in the country after the police. That's the latest in the CDD's Afrobarometer Report on democratic governance, trust in institutions, and corruption. Members of parliament and judges follow closely in third and fourth positions, respectively. The report also says the president is one of the least trusted after his own political party, the NPP. Meanwhile, 86% of respondents said government's fight against corruption has been poor or very bad. Let me bring you details of that report released by CDD Tuesday. So the question was put to respondents. There are many ways to govern a country. Would you disapprove or approve of the following alternatives? That is, 1, only one political party is allowed to stand for election and hold office. 2, the army comes in to govern the country. Elections and parliament are abolished so that the president can decide everything. So this was the question put to respondents. Let's find out what their response was. So we have 89% saying they reject one-party rule. We have also 88% saying one-man rule is a no-no. But we have 67% rejecting military rule. If you compare this to these two, you see that the military, quite surprisingly, enjoys some support. There are some people who think we should have the military come in once in a while to govern, per the question that was asked. And then you have 76 of the people preferring democracy. Now, we're going to do a comparison with previous surveys and see if this has been a drop as far as the approval rate is concerned. Let's look at the next slide. So this one talks about the support for democratic norms and institutions. You have 84% of the respondents saying they support elections as the best way to choose leaders. You have some 78 saying they prefer accountable governance. Then you have 76 supporting presidential term limits. We already have a term limit, which is 2 terms, 4 terms each, giving you 8 years. We have 76 saying that we should have that in place. We should continue. Now, 72% say they support multi-party competition, which is really the system that we have. Now, we're also looking at support for political party turnovers. In the Fourth Republic, we've had the political parties do 8 years each. The question was put, is this something that should be encouraged? Is this something we should continue? We have some 53% saying it is better if power sometimes changes hands in elections from one political party to another. And we have 19 saying that it doesn't matter if any party always wins and continuously governs the country. So 19% of the respondents say if we have just one party winning the election, as far as they win, it is okay. But 53 say we definitely must change the parties within a period of time. The next slide talks about the demand for representation of elected officials. Remember that, we elect our president, we elect our members of parliament, but there's another part of it which is the election of MMDCEs. We have not been able to effect the necessary changes in the constitution to allow us to do that, especially because that has been, there's a certain controversy around whether it should be partisan or people should, aspire for that position as independent candidates. We've not been able to do so, but the survey sought to find out what people thought. Now, 70% say elected officials should listen to voters, not just to be voted for, but should listen, and elected leaders should follow their own ideas. This slide talks about support for media freedom, and this is important. Remember, the survey is about governance, democracy, and also trust for institutions. So the media, the fourth estate of the realm, what did the people think about us? So we have 74%, who give their support to the media. They say the media should have the right to publish whatever. And the question that is asked is very important. Which of the following statements is closest to your view? 1, the media should have the right to publish any views and ideas without government control. And 2, the government should have the right to prevent the media from publishing things that it disapproves of. So majority of the people say the media should have the right to publish without any government control. And that is 74%. 24 disagree. They think that some aspect of the media's work should be controlled. And still on the media, this talking about the watchdog role of the media. So the media constantly investigate and report on government mistakes and corruption. And the other option is too much reporting on negative reporting only harms the country. We have 85%. That is encouraging the media to go on to constantly investigate and report on government mistakes and corruption. 85% supporting the media on that. Some 14% disagree. They say too much reporting on negative events like government mistakes and corruption only harms the country. How so? Well, we'll find out shortly when we speak to the CDD. Now, the level of media freedom as well. Media freedom has been very crucial on the World Press Freedom Rankings. We have dropped significantly. But what are respondents saying about what they think is as far as media freedom is concerned? So you have 71 saying that, well, they think that the media is somewhat or completely free, and 28 saying not very or not at all free. There are 2% who are indifferent. They do not know. Now, this one is our top story. So who is corrupt in Ghana? Per the survey that was done by the CDD in this latest Afrobarometer report, the police is leading, but little wonder. I mean, the police is always led in these surveys. Just last week when we brought you the work that was done by the UNODC together with Shraj and the Statistical Service, you saw that it reflected. But interestingly, you have the Office of the President following closely after the police with 55%. Then you have members of parliament, judges and magistrates follow. Now, these three institutions, so the Office of the President essentially represents the executive. Then you have members of parliament, the legislature, judges and magistrates, the judiciary. And then you have the police, which is the law enforcement agency, leading. So you have top three government institutions leading as far as corruption is concerned. So it goes on tax officials, electoral commission, and that's quite interesting, civil society, civil servants, MMDC, business executives, assemblymen and women, traditional leaders, our religious leaders, unfortunately, also here, public media and private media. So some of my colleagues are also here. The survey found that they are actually corrupt, and non-governmental institutions. Let's look at the next slide. So this one talks about received corruption among police, judges, magistrates. Of course, so it does the breakdown for you, where you have the trend analysis. So in 2018, this was the figure 57%, but that's in 2008, I beg your pardon. But in 2020, we are doing 65. And this is just police, tax officials, judges, and magistrates. So there's been an increase in the corruption levels from 46 to 65 in I beg your pardon. So that's from 57 to 65 within this period. Then perceived corruption at the presidency among MPs. Perceived corruption at the presidency among MPs. And this between the year 2008 and 2022. Again, if you look at it, in 2008, we were doing some 23%. Now we are doing 55%. And this is MP's perception of corruption at the office of the president. And this will be our last slide. So the key findings, among the key public institutions, the Ghana Armed Forces, religious leaders, traditional leaders, and the courts are the most trusted. And trusted institutions declined between 2009 and 2022. Notably, trust in the presidency declined by 25%. If you look at other slides, it actually points to the office of the president as the least trusted institution and the second least trusted. The first least trusted institution is the New Patriotic Party, the president's own party. So how did the CDD come by this survey? Let's go on to Zoom and speak to Dr. Osai Kwapong. He is a fellow with the research institution, the CDD, and he joins us. Dr. John Osai Kwapong, thank you very much for your time here on Join News Prime. So let's start first with the sample size for this research and how many respondents you actually engage. We want to know how widespread this is.
Yes, so the good evening. Thank you for having me. The Afrobarometer survey samples about 2,400 Ghanaians. But if you look at the methodology and the sampling approach that is being used, that's that's a representative sample of Ghanaians. If you actually look at the report that you got on the sampling page, it actually shows you the extent to which it mirrors the nature of the general population along certain key demographic characteristics. What the Afrobarometer also does then is the surveys are done face to face in the language of the respondent.
Great. So let's go into the report now. Now, the results from the question about the support for our democracy and the fact that respondents will want a democratically elected leader and have power change hands among political parties comes at a time when there have been fears about uprising in the country amidst threat of terrorism. Should this allay our fears?
Yes, and I have consistently argued that if you look beyond just the 2022 version of the Afrobarometer survey, that in other rounds of the survey, I have often argued that we have made our peace with democracy in the sense that we've always maintained quite high levels of what on the question, of our preference for democracy. So that has always been at a very high level. And then we've also had very positive attitudes towards democratic norms. So we believe in presidential term limits. We believe in holding the executive accountable. We believe in choosing our leaders via elections. We reject authoritarian types of government. So that is really good, right? That when you look at those particular indicators, yes, we can allay our fears about the peace we've made with democracy. But I think at the same time, there are also some warning signals that are coming through, particularly round 9 of the survey. That doesn't necessarily say to us that our democracy is crumbling, no. But it's just saying to us that there's work that we really have to do, right? That it's not a one-time deal, we got the democracy and it's over. And the one area of major concern is that satisfaction with the way democracy is working is at its lowest in the history of Afrobarometer. So that, for me, is one of the signals where we have to say, we've made a commitment to democracy, but there are some challenges that we have to continue to work on.
And I guess another warning would be the fact that even though we still have some significant support for democracy, if you do the trend analysis, it's dropped, and you alluded to that. But also, how do you balance that with the findings that the armed forces is the most trusted institution? I guess that is also a signal that we must watch.
Right. I believe that the trust that we repose in the armed forces, and this is in looking at the trends, my interpretation has been that because they have had a history of intervening in our democracy, but in the course of the Fourth Republic, that we've been able to sustain this for a good 30 years without any military interventions, that perhaps it is that growing trust that the army would stay at bay and allow our democracy to grow and flourish. So that's the interpretation that I give to that. Okay. I don't interpret it as it is something we have to be very fearful of in terms of what the consequences of that would mean then for our democracy.
But the ratings of the office of the president and the trust of the people in the president has been poor, but also alarming. Is it clear to you what may be accounting for this?
I mean, if you look at the conversations that we've been having in public spaces, if you look at media reports, you can see a certain level of dissatisfaction among Ghanaians as they talk about, economic conditions and, things like that. And so I believe that it is as a result of some of these things that Ghanaians are feeling, right? Their pinch points and the extent to which they believe that a president should be able to address some of these pinch points is fueling this growing levels of low trust in the presidency and some of the perceptions they're holding. It's also particularly worrying because if you look at Afrobarometer 2017, the perceptions of the presidency were very high and very positive. But then you've seen this downward trend since 2017. The next one in 2019 showed some kind of a dip. But then as we come into 2022, you see even further declines. And I believe it is because of the kinds of things that Ghanaians are feeling and wondering the extent to which those things that they are feeling are being addressed is fueling how they are beginning to view their president.
Is this the lowest we've had?
Yes, in terms of approval of the president, is the lowest that we've had. I think if you look at trust too, it's quite low. If you look at perceptions of corruption at the presidency is quite high. So if you put all of that picture together and compare it to where this current president started from in 2017, you begin to wonder why that downward slide and the factors that are accounting for a president who was viewed very positively in 2017.
Dr. Kwapong, considering that the top 4 corrupt institutions are key institutions in our architecture, what would you say, or what does that say about our governance today and where we are headed?
I think it's very worrying, right? These are the key institutions that make democracy work. As you mentioned in your introduction, the police responsible for law enforcement, you have the executive, you have the legislative body, which is parliament, and then you have your courts of law. And I find it very worrying when citizens perceive these key democratic institutions has been corrupt. It also doesn't help when you throw in the fact that the levels of trust typically is also not at the level that you wanted. And the last thing you want is to have your citizens perceiving your democratic institutions as both corrupt and not trustworthy. And I think it's something that we really need to pay attention to and try and find ways to stem that negative perception of institutions in the eyes of citizens, because these are very critical.
But government has done something, hasn't it? I mean, government has passed the RTI bill into law. We have the Office of the Special Prosecutor set up. The Office of the Attorney General itself has been working and prosecute persons alleged to have engaged in corruption. Didn't all these matter to respondents in the assessment of the role of government in fighting corruption?
Yeah, it matters. But if you also think about, at least if you look at something like RTI, right? So we've seen successful cases of RTI where individuals or institutions that have filed an RTI request have been able to get the information. But you've also seen certain challenges and roadblocks that certain persons have faced in trying to get information under RTI. So yes, those are very good steps. The Office of the Special Prosecutor is a very good step in the fight against corruption. But if you also look at citizens' assessment of the fight against corruption, it's still very low, which means that these things may take some time to fully flourish. Perhaps citizens are looking to see, convictions, removal from office. I think it is those things that get citizens to the point where they begin to have more faith and confidence in the fact that something is being done.
Very well. Thank you so much. That's Dr. Osai Kwapong, John Osai Kwapong, speaking to us. He is a fellow of the CDD. And we have the full report on myjournline.com. You want to go there and read. President